I just had enough saved pocket money, just enough to buy this little cheap edition of Tarzan of the Apes. And I fell in love with him, obviously. I mean, this beautiful, glorious Lord of the Jungle. And then what did he go and do? He married the wrong Jane.
It was supposed to be you.
That's really funny. Hi, Linz.
Hi, Moby.
Hi, Bagel.
Hi, Moby.
So, in the course of doing Moby Pod, we've talked to a lot of people.
We've talked to a lot of amazing, inspiring, wonderful people.
And I'm just going to jump right in. Today's episode is probably, for me, the most exciting, most intimidating, most consequential person we've spoken to. And we've spoken to a lot of people, as I just said. I'm just repeating myself. But today, hoo boy.
We got the chance to speak to a legend, an icon, a global figure in animal rights, animal welfare, environmentalism, politics, climate change, everything. Yeah. I mean, just...
Jane Goodall, by the way, in case, because we haven't said her name yet. And it was her birthday. Rather than spend her birthday, I don't know, going to Dave & Buster's or whatever people do on their birthday, she spent her birthday with us and Bagel. And boy, did she love Bagel. I think she really liked you. I think she liked me okay, but boy, did she love Bagel.
Well, I mean, that's natural. That's the normal response to meeting Bagel.
Okay, without further ado, let's just go talk to Jane Goodall.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wrote down a bunch of questions that hopefully you're not going to be offended by because they're not very smart questions. But I wanted to start on my way here. I was looking at social media, and I think it's someone posted from the film that's being made about you. It's following Chasing Jane. And it reminded me, well, I hate touring. And when I first realized the extent to which I dislike travel was I was touring. And one time I was in Poland and I had a half a day off, and the hotel where I was staying was next to a forest. And I walked into the forest, and in one moment I realized I hadn't been in nature in 3 months. And I walked into this forest, and all of a sudden everything made sense to me. Like my breathing got deeper, and I was so much happier. And given your relationship with nature, how do you balance airports, airplanes, hotels with actual connection to nature?
Because I find if you keep your eyes open, you can find nature everywhere. And there was one time I was in Denver airport, and sparrows can get in there.
Yeah.
And so I was walking on, everybody's, on their cell phones, nobody's looking about. And there's this little drama going on. It's a courting couple of sparrows up there. And how the females, and there's a little crumb on the ground. And obviously he was to get it for her. And he came down, he was just going to pick it up when somebody walked by, not looking. It happened 3 times. And it was a little drama. That was nature. But nobody saw it but me. And finally he got it.
Wow.
Then, there's, in the middle of a city, you find nature coming up through the paving cracks, or you find a tree and you see a bird up there.
Well, oddly enough, that's why I moved to Los Angeles. Because I was living in New York, and I was on a rooftop in Tribeca, and I was looking out at the entire city. Like you could see miles and miles, and this little voice in my head said, okay, but where's the life? Because all of a sudden, like this dramatic view, it looked like a cemetery, because it was all stone and glass and metal. And I was like, it's beautiful, but where's nature? Where's the life? And I looked down because I could see Canal Street, and there was an abandoned little parking lot with one tree growing in it. And this little voice in my head said, I think it would be a good idea to live in a place where you can see more than one tree. Yeah. And that's why I moved to LA.
You know, our youth program, Roots and Shoots, that's the kind of place the kids are turning wild again. If they're allowed to by the city, they're planting trees, even around the car park, around the edges, and along the verges in some places.
Mm-hmm. When did you first become aware of like your relationship, to big, broad question, with nature and animals?
Oh, I think I was born that way. I took worms to bed when I was 18 months. Yes, Mum found
When you were 18 months old?
Yes, Mum told me this. I don't remember.
Fun fact.
She said, Jane, you were looking at them so intently. I think you were wondering, how do they walk without legs?
And a funny aside, you know what my first word was? Worm.
There you are. There's a connection.
My mom told me we were driving past a construction site and I pointed and she thought I was speaking nonsense because I said, worm. And she's like, he's saying worms. Like I was pointing to the dirt saying, I bet you there are worms in there. That's really funny.
Oh, that's very funny. My son, he grew up partly in the Serengeti, and we thought he was maybe, something dyslexic or something, because he wouldn't speak until he was, I think, 2 or something. You know what his first words were? Looking out over the Serengeti. Big lion out there, eat me.
Eat me.
That was his first sentence.
Oh my God.
His first word. Well, he said mama or something, but other than that, he wouldn't speak.
Big lion, eat me. Wow.
It's hilarious.
I'm just still trying to process taking worms.
Taking worms to bed, yeah. There's a story that you've told about how you were so curious about animals that you wanted to find out how a chicken laid an egg.
Well, of course I did. Mum took me to stay on a farm, because I loved animals, but we were living in London at the time. So it was exciting meeting cows and horses and pigs. Proper farm. Animals out, not a evil factory farm. Mm-hmm. And one of my jobs was to help collect hens' eggs. So there were these little hen houses where they slept at night, to keep them safe. And there were nest boxes around the edge. So I'd lift up the lid and pop the egg in my basket. And apparently I began asking everybody, but where's the hole on the hen? For the egg to come out, I couldn't see a hole big enough. So nobody told me. And so I hid in a hen house. 4 hours. Nobody knew where I was. And Mum was about to call the police. They'd all been searching for me. And so many mothers would have been angry. How dare you go off without telling us? Don't you dare do that again. Which would have killed that scientific curiosity, asking questions, not getting the right answer, deciding to find out for yourself and learning patience. But I saw a hen lay an egg when I was 4.
And then you knew.
And then, we had a big garden. We moved to my grandmother when war broke out. And I would spend hours watching birds and insects and squirrels. And back then there was no television, let alone cell phones and social media.
So you followed your curiosity all the way to when you were going to Africa. It was all this curiosity and this putting together the lives of these animals, which you've been doing since you were at least
18 months old.
Yeah.
But then, books were I learned from books, nature and books, and the wisdom of the elders, Mm-hmm. But I was 10 when I found the little book. I just had enough saved pocket money. We had very little money in the war, and everything was rationed. But I used to save up my pennies, just enough to buy this little cheap edition of Tarzan of the Apes. Mm-hmm. And, no TV, no film, nothing. So I had my image of Tarzan from reading the book. And I fell in love with him, obviously.
Of course.
I mean, it's beautiful, glorious Lord of the Jungle. And then what did he go and do? He married the wrong Jane.
It was supposed to be you.
That's really funny.
But, I knew there wasn't a Tarzan, but that started my dream. I'll grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. No thought of being a scientist.
I had a similar experience when I was growing up. We were very poor, and I was left alone a lot. And so to entertain myself, I would go through my mom and my grandparents' book collection. And as a child, I picked the Jungle Books because I had heard about the Disney movie. I hadn't seen the Disney movie, but I was like, oh, this must be appropriate for kids. And I know Rudyard Kipling might have had some views that are not politically correct now. And the book, what fascinated me about it, I must have been maybe 8 years old. It's a serious book. Like, it's not a kid's comic book. It's not a cartoon book. Like, the lives of animals are brutal and honest. And it changed me as well. Like, I was expecting dancing monkeys and I was expecting songs. And it's actually quite an adult book in a way.
In a way, yeah.
So you mentioned the wisdom of the elders, apart from Tarzan. Who, in terms of like, because you've inspired lots of people, obviously. Who has inspired you?
Well, I'm not sure that my mother inspired me, but she supported me. My whole family supported me. It was a very female family back then because Pa joined the army at the beginning of the war. Mum took me and my sister to her mother's house in Bournemouth, south of England. And there was my grandmother and her other 2 daughters and Mum and me and my sister. So it was very female. And the one male in my life back then was my uncle, who was a brilliant surgeon. But he only came kind of like every other weekend. Otherwise, it was a female house. And they all supported this love I had.
And in terms of authors or other, like philosophers, scientists? Ooh.
Oh, well, people who inspire me now. I've been very inspired by Muhammad Yunus because he took me to Bangladesh. He introduced me to the women, the first women who took a micro loan. And when they told me what it was like before they had this tiny amount of money in their hand, they all cried. And so we've introduced that into our program in Tanzania, because alleviating poverty is something that so many conservationists forget. But very poor people will destroy the environment to survive. Like around Gombe, why were they cutting all the trees down? To make money from timber or charcoal, or more land to grow food, either to sell as farmers or just to feed their family.
Do you, and I don't know if you guys are friends or not, but do you know Damien Mander?
Yes. Oh, he's a hero.
Okay, because Damien, we became friends with Damien, and he was describing a similar, like the approach to anti-poaching is you can't go in and punish the people. You have to empower them. And like the story of the Akashinga, taking these brutalized, disadvantaged women and giving them agency and power. Have you, you're friends with Damien?
Yes, absolutely. Very good friends with him.
Yeah, his story is so like to go from being a sniper and, he was on the verge of killing himself and then reinvented himself as like using his strength and his power and his experience to help women and to help animals. It's, yeah. Oh, sorry. I guess the interview's over. Now we're just going to
cuddle with Jane.
Yeah, we're just going to hang out with Bagel, maybe feed her some cashews.
Yeah. I have a strange relationship with dogs. You want to know my strangest experience?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
I was giving a talk in South Africa, wealthy couple, house kind of this size, and they'd invited around 30 people, and I was to give a talk. And there was a little podium which was probably from here to here, and it was part of the carpet, and there was not a podium, a little platform. So when I'm talking, I don't know if it's the same when you're singing, but when I'm talking, I'm always thinking a little bit ahead of what I'm next going to talk about. So when I got to Cambridge, because Leakey told me I had to get a PhD, I was told I'd done everything with the chimps wrong. I shouldn't have given them names. They should have had numbers because they were my subject, and I couldn't talk about them having personality, mind, or emotion. Those were unique to us. But I knew that they were talking rubbish because of my dog, my teacher as a child. So when I got there, they said, "We know you love dogs. We've got 2 Basenjis. It's not that they're aggressive, they just don't like people. Can't be bothered with
Kind of like me.
So they said, the female may come up and you can pet her, which of course she did. The male, you won't see him. He just isn't interested. So I'm just thinking about talking about Rusty. The male appears from the back. He weaves his way through the people sitting there. He climbs onto this little platform. He turns, he's touching the side of my leg, looking out over the people. And the owner starts calling us. And then he lay looking over the people. And when I stopped talking about Rusty, he quietly climbed off and went out.
Wow. Speaking of which, she never does this.
Doesn't she?
No.
She's very happy.
Yeah, very, very happy.
She's also not very cuddly. Like she loves people, but she doesn't really do this with me even.
Nope. She senses it.
Yeah.
Well, I do have this thing with animals.
I wanted to ask about that actually, because I think, and especially talking about the animals' personalities, I think a lot of people, and I know that you've seen this a lot in your work, because before you were proving that chimpanzees were using tools, the concept of animals was very different. But
with Western science, it was different in other parts.
With Western science.
Yeah, you go out to the indigenous people, they know.
Yeah. Yes. I guess what I'm wondering is, why do you think that people choose to differentiate themselves from nature in the way that we do, at least in Western society?
I suspect religion began it. The misunderstanding of God gave man dominion over the animals, which is not actually the way it is in the book. It's stewardship more. And partly that, and partly because we like exploiting animals, and it's easier to do if you don't think that they're having feelings like us. I mean, the people now who still maintain that, animals are different, they're people working in medical research labs or these terrible factory farms or exploiting them in entertainment, big game hunting. And, in conservation, the big thing for most conservationists is saving a species. For me, it's always been the individual within the species, because it's not just... I just was with the sandhill crane migration on the Platte River, 2 days, and thousands and thousands come in. They're calling. Have you seen it?
I've seen videos, but yeah.
Oh, you need to go.
And they can all find each other.
Apparently, each one has its own voice, and so there are these thousands all calling. They make a terrific racket, and they can find a family member. Makes all that noise, and nobody understands how they can do it.
I mean, I found myself even in my own way being guilty of that, because I was in New York and I've been a vegan and an animal rights activist for a long time, but it was mainly based on books and statistics, and there was a distance from that concept of animals as an individual. And then I went to Farm Sanctuary, an animal rescue near here, and they have a bunch of cows, rescued cows. And this one cow named Bruno, we connected. And Bruno walked me over. He had a scratching post. And Bruno walked over to the scratching post and started scratching himself, looking me in the eyes. He was showing off. He was like, "You're my friend." He's like, "But I don't see you with a scratching post." Like, he's like, I don't want to brag, but I have a scratching post, you don't. And something happened with that connection, just looking into his eyes, realizing, oh, animals are not statistics. Same with people. People are not statistics. That simple understanding, and it should be self-evident, but it's not, that every living being is an individual. Yeah. And I know I'm stating the obvious, but it's almost the difference between knowledge and understanding. I can say to someone, "Oh, all those people in traffic, they're all individuals. All those people in a sports stadium, they're all individuals. All those cows on a factory farm, they're all individuals." But that's data, as opposed to the true understanding of looking an individual in their eyes, be it a mouse, a cow, a person, and that true the soul recognition that you're encountering an individual. And I also sometimes, like, Bagel will look at me because she's smelling things and hearing things and aware of things that we're not aware of.
Right.
But she looks at me like, you can smell that, right? She assumes that we have that same expanded sense perception.
And some people living like the Bushmen,
Yeah.
the sand people, they have that sense of smell and hearing much more acute than we do. And, going back to the earth, there was a program in the UK about 10 years ago, and they were saying one reason that children are getting sick more easily is because everything is so hygienic and they're not getting the resistance as children to, nasty things. And so this doctor came up with a injection of dirt. I mean, when we were little, food dropped on the floor. It was war. It was, you picked it up and ate it.
Yeah.
Or the dog came and took a bite out of something. Now throw it away. No, we ate it.
Share an ice cream cone with the dog. I still do that. Keep my immune system strong.
Yeah, it's funny. A friend of mine, she runs a veterinary hospital, and she's a vegan and animal rights activist, because it certainly is weird when vets by day save animals and at night eat them. But she raised her son in the veterinary hospital. He is the healthiest person on the planet because he was exposed to so much stuff. And she never, when he was on the ground just eating things that had fell on the floor, she never stopped him. And his immune system, I feel like he's a Superman.
Yeah.
Or our friend Dave, who grew up on a farm, never got COVID, hasn't really ever had a sick day in his life because his immune system was supercharged by growing up on a farm.
Mm-hmm. I think, same with me. Yeah. I got COVID for 2 days. I had a mild cough for 2 days. That was it.
You're like, yep, I think so.
Yeah.
And also who knows, maybe it's a very unscientific thing to say, but like being healthy and being vegan, because I never got COVID. I sort of had it for almost like part of a day and I got over it.
It's sort of similar to me.
Yeah.
But when did you start being vegetarian and then become vegan?
I went vegetarian in 1984 and then vegan in 1987.
Yeah. Because I started vegetarian. I thought, well, what's wrong with milk and eggs?
Yeah.
But I hadn't realized the horror of the factory farms for dairy cows and for chickens.
Yeah. For me, it was the book Diet for a New America by John Robbins.
Oh, mine was Animal Liberation by Peter Singer.
I just did a podcast with Peter Singer.
Yeah.
And he was interviewing me, and it felt so wrong. I was like, you're Peter Singer. You're the godfather of the animal rights movement. How do you even know who I am?
Well, and how do people not know who you are?
But I just felt like it just felt wrong. Like I should be cleaning his car and making him coffee.
Oh, no.
And like,
no, rubbish.
But yeah, Animal Liberation, definitely the power of that book and how it's changed so many people.
Yeah, so the next time, I read it, I didn't know about factory farms. I'd been at Gombe, and when I left England, there weren't any factory farms, not in the UK anyway. And so I read the book, and the next time, I think I was on a plane, and there was a piece of meat on the meal. And I thought, this is symbolic of fear, pain, death. Mm-hmm. I don't want to eat fear, pain, and death. That was the last. I didn't eat it. And I haven't eaten any since.
You have this amazing ability to kind of reach across the aisle. And you've done that a lot in your career, working with working with Conoco, working with these working with the labs that were testing on animals. And I know that was very controversial, a lot of those things that you did.
And it was the worst time in my life going into those labs.
Yeah, it couldn't have been easy.
Oof. Couldn't sleep.
But I think your ability to work well with people you don't agree with
the
is
thing
a superpower.
Was, I went into this first lab, and it was an NIH lab. Mm-hmm. And when I came out, all the top NIH people in the animal business were sitting around a table. I didn't know they were there. And I was sat down, and there was silence, and I realized they were waiting for me to say something. And I was trying not to cry. And so I looked at them and I said, I imagine all of you are caring, compassionate people and probably feel the same as I do about what's going on in there. Well, that was something given because they couldn't say they weren't caring and compassionate. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't berate them. What I did was to show them pictures of chimps in the wild. And I could see them turning inwards and thinking, oh, I see. And it did change. They did enrich. They didn't immediately get rid of the chimps, which they have now, but they enriched their lives. They made big changes.
Yeah, I don't know how. I've never been to an animal testing lab.
I wouldn't if I were you.
I mean, there's certain jobs that I don't know how people do them. You know, like, for example, pediatric oncologists. Like, I couldn't do it. Or the people who go undercover in factory farms. You know, I have a friend who spent a year in a factory farm in North Carolina, and she had to kill chickens and she had to kill animals, but it was to get footage. I don't understand that strength that someone could do that.
It's really strong. It was bad enough for me just to visit.
Yeah. And then one thing that I've been coming up against a lot lately is the size aspect. And what I mean by that is when I was a philosophy major at university, and I had a professor named Professor Fink. And he said, basically, there's an ethical line. Everybody has it. It depends where you put it. He's like, in the olden days, it was between white men and everybody else. And, you know, there's the Albert Schweitzer approach of include everyone. And what breaks my heart the most in terms of animal suffering, weirdly, is mice.
Was what?
Mice.
Mice.
Because mice and rats they're mammals. They're, as we said, they're individuals. And the fact that, like, there are people who will exclude compassion from anyone, like, that there's never a justification for it in my mind.
There isn't. Do you know, have you ever seen a video called 5 Amazing Rats? Mm-mm. Look it up afterwards. And everybody listening, look it up. They all have names. What you see is, they're Canadian. It's completely amazing what they're trained to do and loving it. And you know they're loving it because it ends up they're all outside and he calls and they all come running and climb up. Yeah. And then there's the giant forest rat of Africa. And they're suitable for training because they live 9 years compared to 2 or 3. And they're taught to detect the scent of landmines buried deep under the ground after Africa's civil wars. And now they're being taught to sniff out rhino horn tusks, elephant tusks, pangolin scales, bits of tiger. And the advantage over the sniffer dogs is they can climb up the crates in the ports.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And I've watched them being trained. And one of them had just started her training. She was about 9 months old. And they named her Little Jane. And she's apparently doing super well in her class, sniffing out these things. So she's now online with the organizations called Apopo. So you could adopt her.
Little Jane.
It's $9 a month.
Worth it.
Yeah. We're definitely going to adopt Little Jane.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting because many people would say, ooh, you're naming a rat after you? To me, that's the greatest honor because it's the animals who people easily, or the individuals who people easily exclude compassion for. Mm-hmm. And human history has proven one thing, that it's never a good idea to exclude consideration and compassion from anyone. Mm-hmm. You know, and we look back at the past and we're like, oh, how could those people have excluded consideration and compassion from children or women or horses or dogs? It's like, just, okay, keep going. What's the next step? Which is the circle of compassion has to include every sentient being.
Compassion and empathy.
Yeah.
And you read Elon Musk's latest, saying the biggest mistake of Western civilization is having empathy.
Heartbreaking.
I mean, can you believe anybody could say that?
I don't understand the logic. Is it because like cold decision making?
Oh, because
concern over others?
We do things, and I think, socially, which may cost a bit of extra money or problems. It's much better just not have empathy. Then you don't get all these animal rights people complaining about factory farms. It makes it difficult for business.
But then
He's a businessman.
I guess the logical question then is, then what's the goal of humanity?
Yeah, business to what end?
Like or what's the goal? Like if we're not alive to respect and promote compassion and empathy, then humans are just a waste of space.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you then have power over? Nothing.
Well, that's why my biggest reason for hope is our Roots and Shoots program, which began with 12 high school students in Tanzania, and then a group of 30 of their friends. Main message: every one of us makes an impact on the planet every single day, and we can choose what sort of impact we make. Because everything's interrelated, each group chooses 3 projects to make the world better: to help people, to help animals, to help the environment. It's now in 75 countries, with members from preschool through university, and they are going into adult life. We began in 91. So there's many in decision-making positions, but also just decent, compassionate citizens. And they hang on to these respect and compassion and empathy. It comes with the program. We don't teach it, it's there.
And one thing that reminds me of, because it seems like there's this theme to what we're talking about, which is individuals. Animals as individuals, people as individuals, but also because we live in a time where so many people feel so disenfranchised and powerless. And you think of the power of an individual, such as Peter Singer. One person wrote one book and it impacted millions of people. Or you taking worms to bed when you're 18 months old, or being a 4-year-old sleuth trying to figure out where eggs come from. And the power of that, I think a lot of us, myself included, probably we don't understand the power that we have to lead by example. And it requires not just courage, but a degree of sort of the confidence of service, or the service of confidence, going into the world and saying, okay, I might be presumptuous, but I want to go out and try and make the world a better place. I want to lead by example and reach people. And I'm saying this almost more for the audience, saying everybody has that power. Everyone can be a superhuman if they're just willing to, really choose to do that and make an effort.
Or sometimes circumstance pulled it out, like your fires you had here. Yeah. Lots of heroism.
Yeah. And,
you see something terrible and you run in to help. Normally nobody would know that you had that in you. So circumstances can pull out the best in you.
Yeah.
And it can also lead to the worst, like the looting that goes on after a disaster.
Yeah.
My organization, the Jane Goodall Institute, used to say Roots and Shoots, which is one of our programs, is creating leaders of the future. And I said, don't say that. Everybody isn't going to be a leader. They don't even want to be. But what we're raising are compassionate, caring citizens for the future. That's what we're raising. You don't want to have a child feel, I'm no good if I'm not a leader. Let them be who they want to be.
I think also that, this mentality you were speaking about, Elon Musk saying empathy is a negative in society, or for business at least. I think having this program that teaches children that the opposite is true, especially when social media and there's so many people that are telling, especially young men, that they can be violent, young women that they don't matter. To have an organization like Roots and Shoots that's saying, not only do you matter, but empathy is power, compassion is power, and look at all the things that you can do with that is so meaningful right now, especially.
Yeah, I'm after the Republican children.
Yes. Please.
Good luck. Yeah.
It works. Kids, really.
Well, we've had this conversation amongst ourselves many times so speaking as the one man here is men are so afraid, myself included, of vulnerability. We're so afraid of that, the soft part, the part that cries, the part that has empathy. And I look at someone like a Trump or an Elon Musk or so many men, as you go through life, empathy makes you uncomfortable. Vulnerability makes you uncomfortable. So you keep moving in the other direction, the direction of bitterness and brittleness and, false strength. And it's so seductive. And it's the question, how do you reach men, especially, and teach them that empathy, to your point, is strength?
Yep. I met a man the other day in Dallas, actually. And after I'd given a little talk, he came up to me and he said, Jane, help me. I want to show emotion. I've always thought I shouldn't. But you've made me realize I should and that it's okay. Mm-hmm. So help me.
That's beautiful.
And I met a chief of some tribe somewhere in Latin America, and he was indigenous. And he said, Jane, we think of our tribe as an eagle. And one wing is male and the other wing is female. And only when the wings are equal will we fly high. And, pendulums swing, but I quote that as often as I can because it's so true. We need the two qualities in our society. Mm-hmm. We need the male qualities. We need the female. Male shouldn't be afraid to show they have some of these female qualities, and we shouldn't be afraid that sometimes we need to dominate.
Yeah.
I mean, I think women, to be honest, I was raised by women, and all my friends, for the most part, are women. And I'm not just saying this to sound politically correct, but women are so much stronger than men. Because women, there's just so many examples of that. Because I've had different, Jonathan, you're excluded from this because you're an honorary woman as well. When men get sick, they complain and they're, oh, poor me. When women get sick, they're like, nope, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to be strong. The women I know, they're the ones volunteering. Sure, there are some good men out there, but it's that power. We talked about this on another episode, the power of feminine strength. It's like figuring out how men can learn from that, to reject the Trump Musk brittleness, that posturing masculinity. I think of a Damien Mander. To me, that's a good use of masculine energy, to go out and be of service and use your strength for good, not self-interest.
There's a lot of great men.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know any of them.
I do.
Maybe you can introduce me. I need some new friends.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we do need both qualities.
We do. I think that there's a toxic version of femininity as well in this world. And I think it's all about engendering those concepts of compassion and empathy in both genders and finding ways to have power in that with whatever you're given. That is what will make us be okay, maybe one day.
Well, the sort of swing towards feminism. There are some women who want to stay in the home and look after the children. And they're being made to feel guilty that they should be out having a career and a job, Well, what's wrong if women want to do that? It's very good for the children if they're good mothers. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Or men who want to do that.
Or men who want, there are men who want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important to empower people to find their strengths.
Like my mother did to me.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Like sometimes you can be the person that encourages someone to become a Jane Goodall, to say, this is a curious child and I never want to take that away from them. And I want to encourage them to grow that.
And she used to say to me, if you really want to do something like this, you must work really hard, take advantage of any opportunity. Mm-hmm. And if you don't give up, I'm sure you'll find a way. And I take that message to young people around the world, especially in disadvantaged communities. Yeah. And so many say, Jane, I really want to thank you because you've taught me, because you did it, I can do it too.
Yeah. And I think teaching kids, especially kids that come from places where they don't see empowered people all the time, to say that you have worth and you matter and your voice matters.
Yeah, that's
having
a
just
message
one
of
person
roots
come
and
along,
shoots.
to say that to them.
And especially because there's so many voices pushing people in very dangerous directions.
Yes.
Saying that the only thing that matters is, again, going back, not to use Elon and Trump as the constant negative examples, but like, all these voices saying emotions are weakness, being brutal, being ruthless, being, but then it's also, there's a stupidity to that because you have to sort of take it to its logical end, which is, how does that protect you from mortality? How does that protect you? Like if you're Trump and you're worth billions of dollars or Elon worth billions of dollars, like it doesn't fix the human condition. I know both of them. They're not happy people.
No.
You've probably met more billionaires and heads of state than anyone could imagine.
I haven't really, but I've met quite a few.
And I imagine there isn't necessarily a commensurate relationship between wealth, power, fame, and well-being and happiness.
No, they've even done a study. The King of Bhutan made this happiness index.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they followed, they couldn't do it anymore, could they? But people who migrate in and they have nothing. And they follow them, and as they get more, they like a bit of a job and then marry and have a child. The happiness index obviously goes up. They're doing better. And then some of them, when they get what they want, they stop and they're happy. Others want more. They want their child to go to a better school. They want to get a better job. They want to rise. And they do, but their happiness index goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've been guilty of that as well, is this idea that you should always want materially more. That somehow happiness will ensue if you have more. Mm-hmm. But there's no real evidence. I mean, sure, having enough food, having clothes, having a roof over your head.
Basics.
The bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But like that idea that somehow more equals happiness, and I know you guys know this, it just falls apart under scrutiny. Mm-hmm. There's just, to your point, the example is the more people strive for that, the more miserable and broken they are as individuals.
You go through a city in the streets and people walk by and they're harassed looking and, they're rushing from one thing to another. Are they going to be late? And so on. You go through an African village where the people, by our standards, have very little. They're sitting around, they're laughing, they're singing, children playing around in the dust. They're happy.
Yeah.
And yet people go in and say, oh, these poor people, and they immediately want to change them and give them what we think we need, but which they don't need.
Yeah.
Misery does love company.
I had a friend who was working at an NGO in Ghana and all throughout sub-Saharan Africa, and she has multiple PhDs, very successful, comes from a wealthy family, and she kept getting invited into people's homes, and the people had nothing. And eventually they told her why they were inviting her into their homes. They felt sorry for her because she was too thin and she didn't have multiple children. And they were like, something must be wrong with you because you're so skinny and you only have one child. Like, are you okay? And she's like, I grew up on an estate. I went to Harvard. I have PhDs and you feel sorry for me. They're like, yeah, we're sorry. Things haven't worked out for you.
Yeah, it's true. It really is true that they do think of us like that.
Something that I wanted to bring up is your spiritual life. Do you have if you had to define, not to put you on the spot, a spiritual life or spiritual beliefs and the role of prayer in that, if it exists at all?
Absolutely. My grandfather was a congregational minister. We weren't a particularly religious family, but, we went to church sometimes. And I went through a phase when I was about 16, I think, and I fell platonically in love with the pastor. He was Welsh, and I used to go to church just to hear him give his sermons. And at that time, I became very, I guess you could say, religious. And people said, you're going around with a little smile as though you have a secret. I had a secret. Mm-hmm. I was I felt I was communicating with, I don't know what you want to call it, Great Spirit, but we'd call it God or Jesus or something. I could have been born in a Muslim country, then I would have worshipped Allah or Jew and Jehovah, like my mum taught me that. And then I forgot all that. But once I was out in the rainforest, this strong spiritual connection with the natural world. And I believe there's something there. I don't care two hoots if other people believe it or don't. But for me, I get strength from it. So for me, it's right. And I also believe very, very strongly that this life is not the end. That there's something. I don't know what that something is when we die. But I've read all the books about near-death experiences. I've had a couple of incidents in my own life that make me feel, there's something after we die.
I had a really simple but wonderful epiphany a while ago. At my house, I do my own landscaping. And when the leaves fall off the trees, I just sweep them back because that's how nature intended.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was sweeping the leaves. There's a Chinese elm, and I was sweeping these Chinese elm leaves. And in one instant, I felt this connection to the idea of a system.
A system.
A system where, like, the blurring lines between life and death don't necessarily, like, we perceive them. It's the defining part of our existence. But in the natural world, it doesn't exist. Without death, without decay, there literally is no life. And this tree, when the leaves fell, technically they're dying, but that's what protects the tree. It keeps the moisture in the soil. It's what enables the microorganisms to feed that keep the tree healthy. And it's something changed in me when I saw this so clearly, that, like, this sort of non-temporal natural system, that has been going on for billions of years. And the sad fact that humans are broken from that, we've been separated from that, almost like that's the original sin, is being broken from that system of nature.
Yeah. It's true. And I mean, now we know trees communicate with each other. You've read the Hidden Life of Trees?
Is that Martin Sheldrake? Oh, no.
It's Peter Wolleben.
Yeah, I have that book.
It's a fantastic book. And I met him the other day. I had the most amazing time walking in the forest with him. And he told me so many things I didn't know. Like when a leaf drops, it's brown, but sometimes on that leaf, if you look, you'll see a little green patch. And I always had wondered about those green patches. That's a little insect that lives in the leaf. And when the leaf starts pulling back its the goodness into itself before it drops, these little bugs know, so they block the passage, and so they keep the little living bits so they can live longer. And in that time, they can breed like hundreds and hundreds of babies. I mean, nature is incredible.
It's incredible.
So you look on dead leaves and see if you see these little green patches.
And that's the insect that kept the color.
Whether this is interesting or relevant or not, I was at an event a while ago, and sometimes I'll start talking and I realize either no one's interested in what I'm saying or no one cares or understands. But I was trying to say to them that technically our idea of self-contained life has never existed. And obviously the people looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? I exist. And I said, I can prove it to you very simply, very quickly, that there is no such thing as sort of defined corporeal existence. So there was a flower arrangement on the table, and I took a leaf from the flower, and I said, there's a leaf, right? And I dissolved it in my fingers, and I said, was it ever there? If it isn't there now, what had it been before it was born? If it's on a cellular level constantly redefining itself and constantly changing, and now it no longer exists, how can you say that something has defined existence? And it's that idea of the nature, like we are products of a system. And I think that's the only way we'll ever evolve, is developing more awareness of that, as opposed to the separation. People being separated from nature, being separated from each other, from animals.
That's the tragedy of our civilization, this gradually increasing separation, especially of children, from nature.
And then even further from ourselves, from our communities, from each other.
Yeah, we just all the time
keeps going more and more and more away from where it originally had been, where it's just one piece, and now it's so fragmented.
It's frightening. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know nature, you won't want to protect it.
Yes.
You won't care. And I think hundreds of, maybe thousands of people don't realize that we're actually killing healthy ecosystems.
Yeah.
They don't realize not only are we part of it, but we actually depend on them.
Yes.
For our own future.
I wanted to hear from you about the state of conservationism in Western society, but also globally, and where things are right now, and what you're doing, but also what we can do, what regular people can do to help conservation now.
Well, basically, around the globe, we're doing badly.
Yeah.
Really, at dark times. Mm-hmm. And there was a meeting, very scary, a meeting of climate people, and they got together after years of research, and they divided things up so that there would be, when does the climate heating reach a tipping point? When does the pollution of the ocean reach a tipping point? I think they had 9. And, for some of them, 5 years. So I've always gone around saying we have a window of time, and if we get together, we can make change. But I never thought it was as short as 5 years.
Yeah, that's nothing.
But that's I think it was 2 of the systems, and the others we had longer. And so if it's just 5 years, we've got to get together even quicker.
How do we do that? How do we get together? Roots and shoots.
Roots and shoots. Wherever I go, I spread it. Mm-hmm. Because that's the future.
Yes.
And when they get to 17, 18, university, they're really making change.
Yeah.
Truly. And even the young ones are changing their parents and their grandparents. And at the same time, talking to CEOs, talking to politicians if they listen, and they do. Some of them do.
Yeah.
And I think when people are on the right track, but they're losing hope, that's the danger, because if we all lose hope, fall into apathy and do nothing, we're doomed.
Yes.
So when people come to me and say, oh, look at the state of the world, and I'm just one person, I can't, I said, no, as one person you can't, but people are waking up. And you say my picking up a bit of litter doesn't make a difference. If it was just you, it wouldn't. Not a bit. But if there's 1 million people picking up bits of litter, make a big difference.
Yeah.
And so stop thinking about changing the world. Go and do something in your community. Get your friends to help. Kids get it. Mm-hmm. Then you'll see you do make a difference. And that'll make you feel good.
Yeah.
Then you want to do more.
We just spoke to a guy named Chris Cluey. And he was a former NFL player, and now he's a very radicalized, progressive voice. And that was exactly what he was saying. Because we asked him that question, like, when people feel so disempowered, how can they feel like they have agency to go out into the world and make it a better place? And he's like, start local. Start immediate and local.
Exactly. And yet you hear, think globally, act locally. No, act locally and then dare think globally.
Yeah.
See, it's the wrong way around. If you think globally, you have to feel kind of depressed.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't help it. Mm-hmm. But when you see what happens locally when people care, and I'm lucky, I go around the world, I meet incredible people. I meet places that we've totally destroyed, and given time and perhaps some help, nature comes back. Mm-hmm. Like around Gombe, where I began the chimp study in 1960. And at that time, Gombe was part of this huge forest that stretched across to the west coast. By the mid-1980s, I was shocked to see the forest was in this tiny national park, but outside the hills were bare. And that's when it hit me. People are cutting down their trees to survive. And that's when we started our true community-led conservation.
Yeah.
Not a bunch of arrogant white people going into a poor African village, and there were 12 around Gombe, but locally picked people who went into the villages and said, what can JGI do to help you? And they wanted more food, which meant restoring fertility to overused farmland.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted better health and education for their children. So we worked with local Tanzanians. Then we added things, scholarships to give girls a chance of secondary education, the microfinance, family planning, that sort of thing. And it's been so successful. It's now in 41 villages through most of chimp habitat in Tanzania and 6 other countries where we study and protect chimps. And the people have now understood, because I was given advice by a very wise man who'd been in Tanzania about 15 years. And he said, don't talk about saving the environment for wildlife. Just talk about saving it for your future. Mm-hmm. And then they came to understand that it wasn't just for wildlife. We weren't conservationists saying, oh, you mustn't do anything here because we want the animals to live. And so all those bare hills that were around Gombe have gone. Mm. The trees have come back.
That's incredible.
Because they understand that protecting the environment is their future.
That's amazing.
Mm. That must give you so much hope to see it work.
Yeah.
To see that, like, if you put in the time, if you put in the energy, if you empower people and give them education, that they can save the planet.
That's right.
On a small scale, which in 41 places and all these countries, that's a huge impact.
Yep. And I don't know about tipping points. I mean, I don't know how real they are.
Yeah.
But at least if we really take action, we can slow things down and maybe start to reverse.
And as we were talking about earlier, the sort of the divine healing power of nature, not just to heal us, but for it to heal itself.
Heal itself, yeah.
You know, I live right by Griffith Park, and a few years ago there was a big fire in the middle of the park, and it was started by tourists smoking cigarettes. And when it happened, I was livid, you know, like so angry, and it was this big black scar. You know, everything burned down. And I was hiking through that part of Griffith Park recently, and I couldn't remember where the fire had been.
Yeah.
It's just 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was looking around, I was like, this is it in the middle of Los Angeles, 6 or 7 years past, nature healed itself. Mm-hmm. It's not like...
I hope it does again now.
Yeah. But I mean, the city hadn't come in and done anything. It was just because they don't have the money to do that. They just basically ignored this burn zone. And now it's filled with animals, it's filled with insects, it's filled with trees. And that, in terms of like evidence of some sort of divinity, and I don't want to anthropomorphize natural systems, but that power of healing, you know, like remembering like sprained ankles, hurt shoulders. I don't remember them. Like when it's happening, it seems when you're sick or injured, it seems like the worst thing in the world, and you get healed. You know, through almost no effort on our part, you know, that magic, constant, microscopic healing.
Yeah.
That's what gives me hope.
And our brains are beginning to work out some technology to help.
Yeah.
And when I say we're the most intellectual creature that's ever lived, that's very different from being intelligent. Mm-hmm. If we were the most intelligent species, we would not be destroying the world.
No.
We're not intelligent. We've lost that wisdom of making a decision after asking, how will this impact future generations?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, how will it affect me now, my next shareholders meeting, my next political campaign?
So one of the last times I saw you was a prior birthday. If you
With which way?
Was a prior birthday of yours at Crossroads, and the vegan restaurant in West Hollywood. Yes. And it was such a fascinating event because it was the most A-list event I've ever been to. And, you know, movie stars, rock stars, politicians. And what was especially fascinating that you might not have noticed was that everyone was nervous to meet you.
I know. It's really strange.
And it was just so fun.
Really strange.
You know, so here's this amazing woman who lives with monkeys, and the most list of people are all like scared school children in her
So
presence.
funny.
And I was wondering though, who makes you nervous, or when do you ever feel nervous?
I think if I'm faced with a bunch of scientists who, I don't know, they make me nervous sometimes.
Because of their power to destroy the world, or because they're just
because that people think I'm a scientist. I'm a naturalist, and yes, I got a PhD, but not the way they did. And so they're up to be talking in language which I loathe, and it's not really nervous, but I don't like being with them. Mm-hmm. Usually it doesn't work that way. They usually change, but they usually Because when I began talking about individuals and having happiness and sadness, they were so scathing and scornful, and I broke the mold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It must be intimidating, because I feel like for many scientists, the ones that you're maybe referencing, their data is coming from numbers. It's all very cold and linear. Whereas something I've noticed about you is that there's real poetry in the data that you collect. You're telling a story. There's like real heart to it. There's soul.
It's because I'm a naturalist.
Yes, there's a poetry in it that is authorly as opposed to scientisty. And I think that's one of the things that people relate to most is the heart in your work, which
We've got to have head and heart together.
Yes.
We must.
Yes.
And, when I meet people who disagree, Mum said, listen to them first. Listen to people that you don't agree with. Because maybe they've, got something you've never thought about. Mm-hmm. But then, if you still think your path is a better one, then I find a story. Because you've got to reach here.
Yeah.
You're not going to listen here.
Yes.
Definitely not. So, but if you reach the heart, you may not know at the time. It's like, I said I was in the labs and I got them to enrich the lives of the chimps. I didn't know that had worked for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Then I was invited back and the change was magical, but I never knew that change had taken place.
Right.
Yeah.
Planting seeds.
And I love poetry, by the way.
It shows.
Who are some of your favorites?
I used to write a lot of poetry.
Who are some of your favorite poets?
My favorite poets? Oh, goodness. Well, I really fell in love with the sort of romantic poets first, like Keats and Shelley and
Byron.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then the war poets, some of the war poets like, I can't remember their names now, but they wrote a lot after World War I.
Probably not Ezra Pound. No.
And some of the mystic poets, The Pound of Heaven, and of course Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. I used to read masses of Shakespeare.
I love Shakespeare.
At one point, I wanted to be a poet laureate in Britain.
Why not? Why not now?
Yeah, that actually was one of my questions. So years ago, the first time I met the Dalai Lama, I asked him, I said, so if you weren't the Dalai Lama, what other job would you want to have? And he laughed and laughed. And I feel like it was a good sign if you can make the Dalai Lama laugh. And he said that the other job he would want would be to be a professional sleeper.
A professional what?
Sleeper.
Sleep?
That was job? He just, because I think he was so tired from travel that he was like, I want to get paid to sleep. So if you weren't a PhD naturalist, would that be your other ideal job, would be to be the poet laureate?
Well, if you ask me right now, there's nothing I can do but what I'm doing.
Yeah, but if you had to.
If I had to, well, remember I'm 91. I mean...
I think another good 50 years.
Yeah, just starting.
Yeah.
If I'm just starting. Well, I think something with animals would have trumped poetry in the end. But you can do both.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I only had to stop writing poetry because I'm too busy now. I can't, the beastly emails. Can you imagine how many came in this morning?
I can't. I truly can't even imagine.
I haven't got to the bottom yet, and by the time I get to the bottom, like 10 more have arrived. Yep. Oh, it's awful.
No more emails, only
So I've written a general piece,
Smart.
which is out on our website, on our social media.
Very smart.
Did you ever like any of the Sufi poets?
Which one?
Like Sufi poets, like Kabir or Hafiz or Rumi? Because some of it is very, like some of the more spiritual, naturalistic aspects of the Sufi poets remind me of what you're saying.
Well, some of the philosophical ones, like The Hound of Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I like some of T.S. Eliot, Under Milkwood, read by Richard Burton. Sometimes the only way I can sleep is to play an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Burton's voice is so wonderful. Hugh Fraser, too.
Did you like Yeats as well?
Love Yeats. Yeah.
Do you know, after Trump was elected the first time, Google searches for The Second Coming went up by 1,000%. That's his poem about the apocalypse. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really funny. Yeah. So Yeats is the accidental poet laureate of the apocalypse.
Yes.
Well, we don't want to take up too much more of your time because this is amazing. It's your birthday and you've sat down with us and you've made best friends with Bagel.
I know. Look, she loves you.
Absolutely.
So you have obviously done so many interviews. And there's a question I was asked once when I was doing an interview, which was, what have I never been asked that I really wish someone would ask me about?
I've been asked that too, and I think I've lived so long, I've been asked everything. I mean, there was one question I had not been asked, which was, what's your next great adventure? And there were 10,000 people when I was asked this question. Mm-hmm. So I had to think. And I said, well, if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have said I want to go to there's some really remote place where there's new species to be found, like Papua New Guinea.
Yep.
But I couldn't do that now. So I said, well, dying. And there was a kind of startled silence and then a few nervous titters. And I said, well, when you die, there's either nothing, which is nothing, but if there's something, and I think there is, I can't think of a greater adventure than finding out what that something is. Mm-hmm. The woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I've always been afraid of dying, but now I almost look forward to it.
Yeah. The curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. And who knows, I might feel very differently when I'm on the verge of dying, but it's the only fact of human existence is that at some point we die. And it's the one thing we ignore more than anything. Like everyone pretends that somehow it's not going to happen to them. And I will say, the more time I spend in nature, the more I feel connected to nature, the more I'm fascinated by dying. Because the natural world is so complicated and remarkable and wise beyond anything I can understand. And death is a reconnection with that. If the defining quality of the human condition is that we're separated from nature, I'm not glorifying death, but death is potentially when we get reconnected with nature.
I think what we're afraid of is the process of dying. Not death itself.
I don't know if we're allowed to quote Woody Allen anymore, but he always said, I'm not afraid of death. I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens.
Well, that lovely poem of Browning, it's called Proserpes, and it's, I can't remember it, but it's about facing death and facing it bravely. It's the last fight, the last great fight, the greatest fight of all.
Yeah, the void. I actually, because there's the Nietzsche quote of don't stare too long into the void because the void might stare back into you. Mm-hmm. And then when I moved here, I was reading D.H. Lawrence had come to California and had come to Los Angeles and he hated it. And he said, all they do in Los Angeles is stare out at the void Pacific. And I was like, wow, what a fascinating compliment. This human idea that the void is terrifying, that we can't look into it. We can't, but the void is where Bagel comes from. The void is where those worms you adopted when you were 18 months old, the void creates puppies and life and beauty. So reconnecting with the void, staring into the void, to me is the single most interesting thing we can do as people. You know, as a naturalist, like what can the natural world teach us? How can we reconnect with it?
No, that's what Roots and Shoots are doing.
Yep. Thank you for doing that.
I have everybody listening gets their children or themselves involved in. Yeah. Because so many people, I mean, I don't say that because I thought of it. I say it because hundreds of people have come up and said, joining Roots and Shoots was the best thing I ever did. Joining Roots and Shoots changed my life. Mm-hmm. And joining Roots and Shoots is why I do what I'm doing to help. So,
it's also the best name for an organization.
Yeah, I love it. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's because when you think of a big tree, it may have grown from a tiny little seed, little roots come out, and a little shoot, and you can pick it up, and it would seem so weak. And yet I call it a magic. It's a life force so powerful that those little roots, to reach the water, can work through rocks and eventually push them aside. And that little shoot, to reach the sun, can work through pavements and brick walls and eventually.
Yep.
And so if we think of the rocks and the walls as the problems and the roots and the shoots as young people, hundreds and thousands of roots and shoots, young people can break away from the problems we face.
Amen.
So beautiful. I'm going to be getting involved in Roots and Shoots, and we'll post in our show notes an easy link so that everyone can just go right to the website.
Good, because it really works.
Yes. No, I'm going to be a Roots and Shoots evangelist now.
Yeah, you make me think of like when you think of all the things that humans have made, and humans have made some interesting things, but we've never made a seed. No. You know, one seed the size of a fingernail that can grow into a sequoia, that can live for thousands of, like
the bristle pine.
Yeah,
2,000 years.
And it's to me, it's the only interesting thing that humans can do is pay attention to that, to learn from that, to protect it, to sustain it, because it's just simply more powerful, stronger, more interesting than anything humans can come up with.
By the way, do you know about the date seeds that were found where the date palms of Lebanon used to be? Mm-hmm. And they were found in some place where soldiers used to camp. They're kind of spat out in a corner, 2,000 years old. And this woman botanist who I know in Israel, she persuaded them to let her have, I think, 4 of the seeds. And one of them she managed to cultivate. And it was a male. And she called him Methuselah. And then because she'd been so successful, she asked if she could just have a few more. And they gave her 3. There were very few found. And it was a female. She's called Hannah. Mm-hmm. And so Methuselah they were able to take Methuselah's pollen and pollinate this Hannah. And I got 3 of the very first dates that came from seeds 2,000 years old.
It's like a sacrilege.
And they don't like dates. But these were completely different from anything I've ever tasted.
I mean, I read something that when archaeologists found black beans in a tomb in Egypt, and they were able to sprout them. They're 3,000 or 4,000 years old. So clearly, nature wins.
Nature wins.
Nature can win.
Yeah. Well, again, it's your birthday, and you've given us so much time. Lindsay, is there anything else you want to
I guess
ask?
Something just fun to end on maybe is, because I know that you travel. You're going up the coast of California into Oregon, Canada, and then Spain and Italy. And that's intense for anybody, but you've been doing it, I mean, for years now, and will continue to do it. What keeps you motivated when you're tired, when you don't want to get on another plane or in another car? Like, what is the motivation and where does it come from?
Well, it's just that the world's in a mess. Mm-hmm. I care passionately about nature and animals, and I care about the children that we're bringing into this messed up world. Mm-hmm. And because I was given a lot of gifts, but 2 of them, a strong constitution and a gift of communication. That's a gift. I worked on it, but it's a gift. And I have to. It's my mission. I was put on this planet to do what I'm doing now. So that keeps me going. There's a funny story here. When I was about 14, maybe, my grandmother was alive. And she had a Bible box, and it was a box about this big. And there were very kind of soppy texts from the Bible. They were all very calming and, you know, God is nice and you don't need to worry and blah, blah, blah. So I thought, well, the Bible's not like that. So it took me about 2 months before Christmas. I read every chapter in the Bible. And I wrote out on little strips of paper this long and about that wide, tiny little letters, the text that I thought was appropriate. And on the back, I put where it came from. And I still have that Bible box. It's 6 little matchboxes stuck together, 3, and I made little paperclip handles. And so 3 times now, when I'm about to set off and I'm complaining and I really don't want to go and I don't want to, and perhaps something will happen to stop me, you know. And my sister Judy says, oh, have a text. So every time we take one out, we put it back in a different place. So it's all muddled up, and there's, I don't know, each drawer has, I don't know how many little tight rolls. 3 times I have picked out, he who has once set his hand to the plough and looketh back is not fit for the kingdom of heaven. So she says, off you go. 3 times.
Wow. That's, yeah, I mean, well, okay. It makes me think of, I'm sometimes arguing with myself if I want to go down rabbit holes, but I've already taken you guys down some weird rabbit holes. So years ago, I was studying the Bible. I used to be I taught Bible study. And to sort of adjacent to what you're talking about, I was very challenged by how different the teachings in the Bible were and the text of the Bible was to what I'd been brought up with. Like I was brought up with the idea that Jesus was Santa Claus, you know, happy little guy saying nice things, like go about what you're doing. And I was very surprised at some of the harshness in the Bible, the violence in the Bible, the strangeness in the Bible. And I read, this is the oddest thing. I went to a thrift shop because I was very poor to buy clothes. And there was some book that I was interested in buying, and I who knows what it was, like some fiction book. And I picked it up, and a piece of paper about as big as one of your scrolls fell out. And it said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Learn from me, for I am humble and gentle in spirit, and with me you will find rest for your souls. And I was like, wow. Okay. Like, I still don't know who God is, what God is. I don't consider myself a Christian in any sense, but I think that whatever that universal spirit is, it wants to communicate with us, as evidenced.
Have you still got that bit of paper?
I had it. I taped it in a wallet to sort of look at it, and then I lost it. But I can tell you one other spiritual story. Is when I became sober. No, I'm nothing against day drinking. Chug. When I became sober, because I was just an old timey alcoholic. I became sober and I was so bored and I was so scared. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to socialize? How am I going to date? How am I going to find happiness? And I went to a bar, and it was so challenging because I couldn't drink. And I went into the basement to use the bathroom of this bar on 2nd Street in New York. And in big gold script on the wall of the bathroom, someone had spray painted, trust your struggle. Trust your struggle. And I was like, and I took a picture of it and I've kept it with me, because it's not just about sobriety, but just in general, like, trust the struggle. It's just, and like when you want to stay home and you go out into the world to share your voice, like that, it's a struggle, but we have to trust that it's accomplishing great things. In your case, it clearly has.
Mm-hmm. Well, we all have a role to play. Some people don't discover it. But
Yeah.
I was lucky I discovered my role.
Well, even more so, we're lucky that you discovered your role.
Very.
Not to make you uncomfortable.
But, some people think when I say I had a mission, they think that means that we don't have choice. And I don't believe that. I'm sure we have free choice. And points have come in my life. I could have chosen to go a different way, but I didn't. And that's brought me to where I am now.
Which is a beautiful place.
Yep. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thank
And
you so
happy
much,
birthday.
Jane.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jane. And
Now-
happy birthday. And now let's all eat
Birthday
cupcakes
cake.
and cake and cookies and all of the bazillion desserts we have.
I don't need to state this, but we just had a long conversation with one of the most iconic animal rights vegans on the planet, Dr. Jane Goodall. I still can't believe, because I've known about Dr. Goodall since I was probably 4 years old.
Same, younger.
Like some National Geographic special, and then the cover of National Geographic and the cover of other magazines. It is one interesting aspect of doing Moby Pod is I get intimidated by people. Not always. Sometimes it's our buddies. But being able to sit down with Jane Goodall for a few hours on her birthday, I don't know if it came through, but I was nervous.
You were?
Were you nervous?
Well, when I first met her, I was very nervous. But then the more I got talking to her, I realized she's just a good person who's unbelievably connected and curious and kind and sweet. And my nerves kind of went away very, very quickly when we started chatting with her.
Okay, mine never did.
Aw.
Yeah. Also, I know that a lot of people listen to Moby Pod, but visually, would you like to talk about the fact that you and Bagel are wearing matching outfits?
Oh, well, I don't know that there's much to say other than...
You and Bagel are wearing matching outfits?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're listening, it is worth maybe taking a look at the social media or, I don't know, the YouTubes or something, just to see Lindsay and Bagel wearing identical striped hoodies.
Yeah, it's I was very inspired by that scene in Austin Powers when, remember when Dr. Evil and his mini-me, they go to prison and they have a lot of different matching outfits throughout that scene when they sing just the two of us in prison. And so I'm trying to recreate that moment.
Apart from the prison and the hairlessness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you and Bagel are
hairy non-prison.
mini-me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to stop recording and stop talking. And it goes without saying thank you to everybody. Thank you to Jonathan Nesvadba, and thank you Lindsay and Bagel, and thank you Erin Stehler, and thank you Human Content, and
thank you Moby, and thank you Jane Goodall, and thank you...
And Jane's friend Susanna, who travels with her. But thank you Jane Goodall for being an unapologetic voice for animals and animal rights and veganism.